Hey, everybody. Hoping you're having a great day. We're going to do a bit of a deeper dive on the Rendlesham, not just the incident, but the subsequent code that Jim Penniston seemed to get as a binary download. And are you familiar with this, Jay? Have you heard of the
Not
code?
not as much. I mean, I've heard that somebody wrote down something, but I didn't know what it was about, or so I'm looking forward to finding out what this is going to pertain.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a popular story. Jim Penniston, John Burroughs, they see a craft, looks like an acorn, has hieroglyphics on it. Jim touches the craft and apparently gets this binary download. The next day, scribbles a bunch of ones and zeros in his notebook before he forgets. And then subsequently, this was decoded. And 38 years later, the relevance of it all seemed to come out. And that was in 2018. And one of the men who did the work on that code is a guy named Gary Osborn. He's also done a lot of writings on sort of ancient mysticism, esoterics, pyramids, Giza, Egyptian culture. So he's taken sort of the UFO hat that he wears, his mathematical mind, and what he knows of the ancients. And he's worked directly with Jim Penniston and as well as John Burroughs and some other guys back in the day, and did a lot of work really deciphering. And you have to be thorough because otherwise you're just trying to make things fit. If you go,
Yeah.
hey, if I take this times three, it's a perfect match. That's not good enough. There's going to be mathematical skeptics and people that just want to roast you for your analysis. So he's brought some of his findings. We asked him to put together some slides, make it a little more digestible. Because if we're just shooting numbers all day, it's going to get real confusing real fast. But we'll break it all down to the basics of what he's trying to say. And it's amazingly important what comes out of it. So it's an exciting day. We're gonna
Heavy day, full of math. But
Heavy day. Yeah. If
yeah,
you like this stuff, if you like ley lines, energies on the planet, sort of magnetic fields, even as specific as factoring in like the tilt of the earth and where coordinates were thousands of years ago, messages that we think our ET neighbors are trying to or communicate with us, and what better medium than math? It's the only thing that would be maybe in common between them and us as you know they've been so far evolved and we are still here. How else can they communicate with us, right? We don't even know if they are aliens per se. Whatever this intelligence is has used codes, math, a lot of similarities to really communicate with us. So we're going to pick the mind of a great man today. We're going to go down the whole of the not only the Rendlesham Forest but the Rendlesham Enigma, and that is the code of Rendlesham. So with that, we'll be right back with Mr. Gary Osborn right here on UAP Studies Podcast.
Are you paying attention?
Welcome back to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my best buddy, Jason Gilmet.
how's it going, Louis?
It's going well. It's going to be a deep dive today. We did a show maybe 6 months ago on the Rendlesham Forest incident with John Burroughs. But from that, as many people know, there was a binary download on Jim Penniston, a code, and then lots of miraculous information that later came out of that. So we've invited our friend Gary Osborn, who was actually referred to us from our friend Jimmy Blanchette, who we had on not long ago. He presented some of Gary's materials. We found it fascinating. So we thought, let's chat with the man himself. So, I mean, Gary has been a writer on mysticism and esoteric traditions for over 20 years. He's written books on things like alchemy, ancient shamanism, Pyramid of Giza, and of course, the Rendlesham Code itself. So we're very excited to have him. He's going to present some slides and some visuals today, which is always cool. Makes for a light day at the shop for Jason and myself.
Probably more for me than for you. Me and math, never been friends at all, ever. Yeah.
Well, Gary's going to make it digestible, and he has a way with words, and I think everyone's going to find it interesting. So with that, a very warm welcome to the show, Mr. Gary Osborn.
Thank you, guys. As I said before, I'm honoured to be on here, and I have to thank Jimmy Blanchette for putting my name forward.
Yeah, he definitely gave you credit where credit was due, and we're excited to see what you've come up with. But for those who aren't as familiar with you, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, what got you into the topic, and then what got you into writing the materials that you've written.
Yeah, I mean, I have to go back to 1993 when I had an experience I call my core experience. I had a lot of other experiences were going on around that time, but I didn't know what it was. and it was like a rebirth. I wasn't the same after that. It was like my IQ had been boosted through this experience. Before that, I'm a normal guy from Peckham, southeast London, and I still am. I still am that person. But this experience changed me, and I researched into it. I was doing a lot of research into it. I was always reading books anyway, but I researched into this experience, and I found out after a while it was what yogis in the East and in India, Hindu, called Kundalini. What I experienced was this surge of energy rushing up and down my spinal column, as I was laying there. But I was in a kind of hypnagogic dream state before that happened, and funnily enough, I was on this kind of like a craft, but it was like this curved room, and I saw someone sitting at a monitor. And some being sitting at a monitor, and I felt the ground shaking. It was just like coarse vibration. And then I felt it rushing up my legs. And I realized it was happening to me while I was laying on the bed in this dream. But I came out of the dream and I realized it was actually happening. There's this vibration of energy. It's so strong and so intense. You feel like you're invincible, or you feel like Superman. It's like a surge of energy, extra energy, surging through you, and it's coarse first of all, then it refines. And it's like this vibration going up and down your spine, and it's going faster and faster, and it's kind of in frequency, the oscillations. And finally, there's this burst of bright white light from the center of the head, and even though it only lasts kind of like a fraction of a second, it feels like an eternity at the same time. There's a paradox with it, and come away from that and you think, what did I just experience there? It's like my body's been keeping this a secret from me all my life, and it was a life-changing event. And as I said, I had to research into it. I had to find out what it was, and I had no prior instruction or knowledge of what this experience was. And I found out, it's a universal experience. It's experienced by a lot of people, and in the West. I realized that I found through my research that a lot of people who have these Kundalini awakening experiences, and it began in the 1950s, really. Now, I don't know what started that. Maybe it was the drug culture. It started in the 50s, actually, and then progressed. But more and more people have been awakening in the West with this experience, and it happened to me spontaneously. So, I did some research into that, and I would have all these insights come to me. And I'd be at work and I'd have something come to me, I'd make connections, and I'd be writing down on any scrap of paper I could find. I used to work in a graphics, screen printing business, and it was a family business after a while. And I would write down anything that came to me on a scrap of paper, cigarette box, anything I could see laying around, and stuff it all in my pocket, what I'd written down, and get back home, and I'd be on a 4 megabyte RAM machine. And I transfer it all onto the word processor. And after a while, I'd written enough that if I printed out the pages, it'd be probably 2 inches thick. Wow. So there was all these insights, and I was having insights into mini black hole white holes. I was imagining that there was the mini black hole white holes at the center of elementary particles, what we call elementary particles. And all about frequency. I've still got all that stuff. It's amazing what was coming to me at that time. And as I said, I wasn't really interested in all this. It was, I was hungry for more information. I was reading. And someone said to me, why don't you write this down and write a book or something? I said, no, I had no aspirations to be an author. No ambitions in that at all. And I was in a rock band. I used to play guitar, lead guitar in a rock band. We was playing like London, the outskirts of London, like Surrey, Kent, around London, all these like nightclubs or pubs. So I had no ambitions to be a writer, but I kind of fell into it, got into it. I got in touch with somebody who co-authored the first book I wrote, which was called The Serpent Ground, where I introduced some of the insights I had into that experience. And Also The Shining Ones, which was in 2005. Yeah, no, 2005, The Serpent Grail, 2006, The Shining Ones. So one of my insights was you look at a cross-section of the brain in sagittal view, and the Eye of Horus symbolism, ancient Egyptian Eye of Horus symbolism, and I was kind of superimposing that over the brain and realizing that the parts of the Eye of Horus symbolism, the sections that kind of deal mathematically with the senses, the five senses, matched the areas of the brain where those senses are, So that was one of the first things that sort of came to me, other than this mini black hole, white holes kind of thing going on. And I was able to go through the ancient Egyptian symbolism and Hindu symbolism. I could see that there were parallels, there was making these connections. And I realized that the experience I had, the ancient Egyptians already knew about it. They knew about it, and there was this cross kind of pollinization of knowledge going on between the Hindu civilization, ancient Hindu civilization, ancient Egyptian. And I realized they knew about Kundalini, but they had their own name for it. They knew about the chakra system and all that. So, and since I started writing about it, and I did put it on the internet, it's been doing the rounds on the internet, the superimposition of the eyeballs on the brain. And you see it everywhere now, but no one knows the source of that. And it was me, it was my idea, it was my insight. But, from my own experience. I think my experience was conducive to all these insights. And I always have said, since I've been working on that code, which we're going to talk about in a moment, I think that my experience and what I was researching afterwards was all in preparation for me working on the code. Because I was never into mathematics. I hated mathematics. A lot of people do. They see it as intimidating.
Yeah. And
the kind of anything about numbers, just put up a wall against it. But I realized that when I was working on the code, I knew it was mathematical and geometrical. And I had to get into mathematics. And the thing is, I think that experience kind of, as I said, it boosted my IQ. I was able to have this mathematical ability. But yeah, and I would say that I'm good at remembering long numbers, like phone numbers. And I could remember the constants, the universal constants quite easily. And so when I'm juggling with numbers and I see these constants pop up and I see these connections. A person who became a friend of mine was Robert Bovell, who wrote about the Orion correlation theory. He was the first one to see this connection between the three pyramids at Giza and the belt stars. And he said, what I think you are, he said, you're an intuitive mathematician. You're intuitive about it. He said, even though mathematics is kind of logical and rational, and it's like this kind of union between this kind of rational side and the intuitive side. So there's the left and right brain, all that kind of came into it. And I realized that the hypnagogic state, which you mentioned earlier, is conducive to those paranormal mystical experiences, because it's like a union of the two opposites, everything, the dual opposites. And it's like that experience is where they come together, like sleeping and waking, and when you're awake and asleep at the same time. So it's like a third kind of state of consciousness, altered state of consciousness. And Colin Wilson became a friend of mine. Colin Wilson, the writer. Have you heard of Colin Wilson?
I have not, no.
He became a friend of mine. He was a literal giant in the UK, and literary giant, I should say. And I became friends with him, and he said that the hypnagogic state is the open sesame to paranormal mystical experience. I realised that with the UFO phenomenon, Jenny Randalls, who calls it, she refers to it as the Oz factor, but it's really the hypnagogic state. And it depends on how intense you're in that altered state. But, it is what lucid dreaming is as well. Yeah. And also the night terrors, like, sleep paralysis and that. But it depends on how intense you're in that state that you will experience things. I'm sure that is conducive to a lot of the UFO encounters and abduction experiences. You have to be in that state of consciousness, which is like a fusion of the opposites. You know?
Right.
So, yeah. So after a while, in 1997, this is before I became an author, Nick Pope walked into my pub, my local pub in Surrey. And I thought, I know that guy. Because when I was doing my research, I was looking at all these UFO kind of magazines and I see his picture. I know him. It's like he walked into my reality. So I thought it's like so synchronous, such a synchronicity that I thought I need to go over and talk to him and introduce myself. So, and he was getting a pint at the bar, and he walked round the back and he's sitting there with this woman who I'm sure must have been Georgina Bruni, you know, because I didn't know he was researching the Rendlesham incident at the time. Okay, he's probably interviewing Jim Penniston. And so I introduced myself. I told him about my experiences that I've been looking into the UFO phenomenon to see, you know, because I see parallels between my experience, Kundalini, and the symptoms of that experience popping up in people's accounts. So I thought there's a link there, there's a connection. But it kind of went over Nick Pope's head. And we went up a few times in that pub because he had only moved around the corner, that's why he was there. So we met up a few times, and after a while we kind of parted ways, you know, said what we had to say, and that was it. And then 13 years later, Jim Penniston gets in touch with me, wanting me to look at this code because he knew that I was into kind of solving these the kind of ancient Egyptian symbolism and other things. I was into codes, and he said that he was told by a mutual friend of ours to get in touch with me. And I asked Jim, I said, you know, I used to talk to Nick Pope back in 97. He said, did Nick Pope tell you to get in touch with me? Or he said, no, I don't know anything about that. But it's a kind of strange thing, you know. So yeah, there's like this synchromesh phenomena going on, you know. Whenever you get involved in this kind of thing, there's all these synchronicities come up. You're meeting people who are either directly or indirectly involved with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And it's all along the path, you know, that they have something to contribute. You know? So, yeah, Jim Penniston got in touch with me because this mutual friend had said, why don't you get in touch with Gary Osborn, because he was dreaming of 23.5 degrees, okay? And he said in an email, the title of the email was 23.5. That was his first email to me. And it's Jim Penniston, and I thought, Christ, I was just looking at this documentary on TV, watching this documentary on TV where someone's playing him, you know, an actor playing him. And then he gets in touch with me 2 weeks later out of the blue, you know. Because I was thinking then, that'd be an interesting guy to talk to. So anyway, Jim Penniston said, yeah, I have had dreams of this 23.5 degrees. He thinks that he told me that he thought they were like regions on the planet to do with temperature, 23.5 degrees. I said, no, it's the Earth's axis obliquity. It's the tilt angle of the Earth in respect to the ecliptic plane. So he said, oh, right, I must have learned that at school or in the military, but I've forgotten all about that. So he said, I've got coordinates to send you. He said, they've just been deciphered, and they were deciphered by Joe Luciano at the time. He said, there are 7 in total, but one set of coordinates has already gone out into the, you know, it's been announced on Ancient Aliens. He said, so there was another 6 that were decoded from the binary code string. He said, I want you to look at these coordinates all together and see what you come up with, you know. And I want to see if there's any additional information. He said, give it your best shot, see what happens. So I wish we were going to look at in the presentation I'm going to show you. I wanted to see what all these coordinates were on a map projection of the Earth instead of on the Google Earth at the time. You know, I mean, it was amazing seeing the cursor move dramatically across the globe to all these ancient sites where there were either pyramids or sacred mountains like Taishan. There was also Arizona, Sedona. Am I rambling on too much? I don't know.
No,
Whether you
not
want
at
to get a
all.
No,
question
no,
in.
not at all.
Not at all.
You want to get a
I
quick,
will
but this
just
is all-
prefix though the code
Yeah.
you're referring to. So for people that may not know much about the Rendlesham Forest incident, there was a sighting military people were involved with. One of the gentlemen involved, Jim Peniston, claimed to have a binary download and literally wrote ones and zeros in a book
Yeah.
and didn't know what to make of it. And then it was initially deciphered, and then Gary has done more work in that sense. But essentially, that code were very significant coordinates on the planet. And if anybody's into ley lines or things like that, or, vortices, portals, that type of thing, it's very much in that realm. So that's the code that we're referring to.
Yeah, 7 sets of geographical coordinates embedded in the code, and they were deciphered by Joe Luciano, who was he worked in the USAF as well, and he approached Jim Pennison and said, after the Ancient Aliens episode was televised, he was wowed by it. He says, "Oh, I know about binary code." So he got in touch with Jim, and then Jim said, "Yeah, why don't you work on it?" So he was the one who deciphered the coordinates. So anyway, Jim sent me those coordinates, as I said, and he sent them on the 2nd of February, 2011. Although he first contacted me in 2010, he sent the coordinates on the 2nd of February 2011, which was my son's birthday. It's also Groundhog's Day, isn't it?
No, yeah, right.
Yeah, here it's February
in bulk,
2nd, I think.
In bulk. Yeah, in bulk. And there's a connection with High Brazil there. It's not High Brazil. I think the Irish pronounce it High Brazil, and that's one of the coordinates in the code. But there is a connection between that date, the 2nd of February, is in bulk, and it's the pagan tradition, and it's a connection with High Brazil anyway. So it's funny that he sent me him on that day. Anyway, as I said, I looked in Google Earth, saw how they dramatically went to all these places, but I wanted to see him on a flat map projection on the Earth altogether. Because when he said 23.5 degrees in his email, I thought, well, I'll do what I usually do. This approach that I did to this research I was doing into 23.5 degrees, the Earth's axis obliquity. And I found in most sources throughout history, there's these encoded references to the angle of 23.5 degrees. And, they're mostly in paintings from the 17th century. And this book here, The Giza Prophecy, which I wrote with Scott Crichton, there's some examples in there of what I'd found. It's one of the reasons why he wanted me to write a book with him. I've not yet written a book on my own. There's all these people saying,
You're doing half of the other guy's job, Gary.
Teamwork to make the dream work. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, that's why Scott Crichton got in touch with me. And his theory was that the reason why there's all these references to the angle, you see spears, swords, linear objects like edges of tables, the steps, daggers, even pointing fingers at 23.5. It's all these sources that you see this crop up in, and he said that it's mostly to do with the geocentric view of the church at the time, where they believed that the Earth was at the center of creation, and it was perfect. It wasn't tilted; it was upright, and you could see that what Scott was saying was these people that were kind of secret society scientists at the time, they were encoding these references as if to say, to the church, as if to say this is the real true condition of the Earth. It's not what the church is saying. So they encoded them in paintings. But then I thought, well, actually, a lot of these encoded references go way back. I mean, they go back further than 7,000 years. Okay,
that's
because
crazy.
Even though I was the first one to begin finding these references and all these sources to that angle, there was a guy named Frank C. Higgins, who was a 32nd degree Mason. And he had a book out called Ancient Freemasonry in 1919. And he was the first to actually bring attention to these references to the Earth's axis angle. He found them in keystones. If you take one side, it'd be 11.75 and the other 11.75. But together it's 23.5, or 2 times 23.5 is 47. So he found them in these ancient keystone amulets. And he said they go back further than 7,000 years. So I thought, well, if Scott's theory is right, how is it that there's this reference to the Earth's obliquity angle, even going back further than the church? You know? And then I found them in paintings of Jesus Christ carrying the cross to Golgotha, where he's raised upright on the cross. You know, he's crucified, he's raised upright on the cross. And he's carrying the cross at the angle of 23.5 degrees. Yeah. So then I realised, wait a minute, they used to raise the Jed column of Osiris, you know, the ancient Egyptian Jed column, which is his backbone. And they used to raise that on, I think, on or around the spring equinox, which are only 2 days in the year when the Earth is up. Well, the Earth would be in a condition as if it was upright with equal day and night. And they would raise this Jed column, his backbone, upright to be resurrected. Now, Jesus Christ is raised up on the cross, upright, to be, not to be resurrected, but to enter the heavenly kingdom. So I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's a whole kind of missing piece of the whole like Messiah mythos. Yeah, it's just gone under the radar, you know, with all these references to the angle, and especially with Jesus Christ carrying across that 23.5. It's either the main beam or it's the cross beam. So there's loads of them. There's loads of them. In fact, I got fed up with finding them because I knew I had to document them. So anyway, look, we're going far afield here, but all this does make sense with the code, right?
Right.
Let's see what you got, Gary. You got some very interesting stuff here. Sort of wet our.
Is there any questions you want to ask before we go?
Actually, I was going to ask you because, you know, we've interviewed a lot of people that, you know, are experiencers, and they all seem to either be given a gift somehow of like what you're describing, mathematics, or even Kevin Day is like, he knows his geology or something like that. Like he's amazing. You know, some people come out with these amazing abilities, and Tesla once said that even the way that he thinks, he's just a receiver, that these ideas would come from somewhere. And we keep hearing that as a pattern over and over again, and people have had experiences that either their consciousness is awakened, a part of their brain is now more active than others. So there's an actual side effect to these encounters. And same, Louis, you were talking about how these gentlemen had approached, there was John Burroughs and then Jim Penniston as well. And they received something from being in close proximity to a craft. So is this something that's intentionally given, do you think? Or is this something that's just a byproduct of being close to these objects?
I think it's a byproduct of being close to those objects. There's always a bright white light kind of experience, you know, with these, I mean, with UFOs, UAPs as well.
Right.
And it changes, somehow changes. And, you know, I was writing about the thalamus in the brain. And I know that Kit Green and Gary Nolan, was it Con Keller? They were writing about the thalamus part of the brain, but they were talking about the putamen and the caudate area, and saying that experiences have some sort of signature. There's some changing in the chemicals of the brain, and they were able to kind of find this with them. I mean, you've talked to Gary Nolan, so I think you might have covered that. I didn't see the whole video, but yeah.
He was talking about the basal ganglia or something like this.
Yeah, that's
I think that's what it's called, right? Yeah.
And we've had other people mention sort of the pineal gland with those piezoelectric crystals. It makes sense if you get close to something that's vibrating at a very high frequency. It's like radiation. It's going to affect you whether you want it or not. And a lot of these people that report, you know, downloads and now having new talents, new information, even just a new way of thinking or feeling, it comes as a result of this. So I think you're right, Gary. Just being in the proximity of that is enough to boost something about your energy level. Well,
they called that the antenna now, don't they? I mean, it's just a new kind of
the third eye, right?
Buzz name for the third eye. Yeah. So I was writing about all that back then. I mean, 2003, 2004, and a lot of it, some of it is on the internet. But anyway, I realised that there are these connections between the phenomenon and what's happening with people now being awakened and having all this information coming to them. So, Jim Penniston, he touched the craft. He had to download a binary code. and he had to write them down the next morning because he couldn't get to sleep. There's 16 pages of binary code, and the amount of information that was encapsulated in those ones and zeros is enough to fill 3 volumes.
Wow.
3 large volumes. In fact, I'm working on 2 books right now. I've got to get the next one, which is a follow-up to the Rendlesham Enigma. That one.
That's like a phone book. How many pages is
Yes.
that?
700. I was
Yeah.
talking to Jason.
700.
Well,
Wow.
I was talking to Jason, and it's like 700 pages, but 300 pages of those are endnotes, and it's like there's 2 books in one there because the main text is Jim Penniston's account and what happened to him afterwards, the aftermath, and the endnotes comprise of all the things that were going on around him, which he wasn't aware of. Involving the other witnesses, what they said, what other people got involved. Theories and stuff, and things that were going on around him. So it's 2 books in one. It's like a dissertation.
Wow.
I'm proud of it because
You should be.
It's a lot of research gone into it. 4 to 5 years that took. So as I said, Jason, you could ask me any question about the Rendlesham incident, and I could tell you. I mean, Jim Penniston is amazing. I didn't know that, Gary.
Yeah.
Because I've done a lot of research into it. Jim gets dates wrong, but I always thought that you've got to lay down a chronological timeline of events. I mean, that's what you do in any kind of murder situation. And that's what I did with that. So it's all chronologically, written
Yeah.
out.
Well, it's amazing that the gentlemen were able to get that close to the craft. And we can say for sure that it was a craft because they were seeing symbols on it. So it came from somewhere, some sort of civilization, if not ours, created those symbols. And that means that there's another civilization's technology that affected these gentlemen. So it is a big case because as we have Roswell, there's a lot of hearsay, right? It's like, I heard it from this guy that this is what happened. But with this, you get the witness testimonies, and a lot of people come forward and they're all saying something incredible, all coherent about the same situation, but they all seen it with their own eyes, that this was a craft from somewhere that is not from here. And it blew their minds. Like, they got medically ill from it. Some of them got telepathic downloads. It's a big event. It's very important.
Yeah. The craft, Jim has always said it was a drone. He underwent hypnosis, but he already knew what had happened to him. It's not like he got a lot of this from hypnosis. He got quite a bit, but he said it was a drone, and he says that what came up in his hypnosis, it was from the future. But he doesn't believe that per se. He's open to a lot of other suggestions or ideas about it. All I can say is, having worked on the code, this is an extratemporal event. It could be, and this is something that no one's really looked at. Say it was an ET event, that the other craft that like Colonel Holt experienced and the others experienced on the 3rd night. Let's say this was an extraterrestrial event, but what if in the future they were able to break the time barrier and want to come back at that point, that event, to monitor and see what was going on? And that's where the drone comes in, which Jim Penniston and John Burroughs, encountered. It's just a different take on it. You could imagine there being maybe 2 different kinds of intelligences here. One that's kind of temporal, extratemporal, and the other extraterrestrial. We don't know. Yeah. But that's it. We just don't know. There's no proof of it yet. But what is really, for me, the kind of jewel in the crown of, contact, message contact, it's the code, because it's mathematical. It's authenticated itself, and this is what I'm going to show in these slides. So if there's any other questions before we go, how long we got anyway before we?
Well, we're about halfway through the program, so it's a good time to get into your material, and we'll ask you anything as it comes up, and we'll try to maybe clarify if anything comes across at a super high level. So do what we told Jimmy Blanchett. Your level of brilliance is up there. Cut it in half, and then cut it in half again, and then the average public will pick it up.
All right, let's see what we can do. I hope this goes well. can I just say to you, when Jim Penniston first made me look at the code, when he got me to look into the code and come up with the best shot in what the coordinates meant in addition to information, he never really gave me any feedback. I was showing him, I was telling him something, I found this, I found that, but he wouldn't give me any feedback. And I got quite pissed off with him, actually. And I
You're
told
doing
him
a lot
so.
of research. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I told him so, but he said, you know, I just wanted to leave you alone. He said, I didn't want to guide, you know, sort of guide you in any kind of, on any path or influence you or, you know, he said, I just wanted you to come up with whatever you found by yourself without me having said anything or maybe, you know, had anything to do with what comes up, you know. So, yeah, and a lot of what I found mostly is by myself and also in collaboration with a few other people. Right, so let's...
And just as you load this up on the screen for us, mathematically, what are the odds of what he wrote down in 1980 would actually come out to this research? Like, what are the odds, like, that this would actually be dead on?
38 years in the future.
Yeah.
The code is a temporal anomaly, right?
Yeah.
It took me till 2018 to be able to decipher it properly. How is it that a code that originates in 1980, and he did have his notebook looked at by Dr. Robert Wood, who did the MJ, the Majestic documents.
Majestic World, yeah.
And he said that the paper and the ink, they must have been circa around 1980. Now, Jim's not had it forensically. He's not had the paper or the ink forensically tested yet because it's cost prohibitive. You know? Mm-hmm. So that's yet to happen. But I'm, you know, waiting for anyone to come forward and say, yeah, I'll finance that. But as far as Dr. Robert Wood is concerned, it goes back to 1980, the notebook. So that's something. So anyway, how is it that a code from 1980 takes until 2018 to be fully deciphered? Because I had to wait until there were tools, programs, calculators, reliable and, you know, accurate programs and mapping data, survey maps of Giza, because I've mostly concentrated on Giza. And Giza is now giving up its secrets because of the code. And it took me until 2018 to finally decipher it. But it came from 1980. So that's a temporal anomaly. See, it's just,
yeah.
And some of the things that were coming up made sense with what was going on in the reality at the time. And also Manu, I don't want to take up too much time on this, but Manu Saves Today, okay, who wrote this book, Under the Sphinx. The code points to the Sphinx. It points to this left forepaw. And Manu, I met in 2018. His work is kind of being pointed to by the code in several different ways. And Manu says to me, what are you saying? Are we kind of working to a script? As if we've got no will, you know. I said, no, it's not that. It's just that whoever devised the code is looking back in time and they know what's going to happen, you know, and it's in the code. It's kind of weird. Anyway, you'll see this when I show you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that like what Edgar Casey was saying too, where there's something buried under the paw of the Sphinx? He got the info in a clairvoyant way, but if the code alludes to that, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine Manu having a lot of pushback over that because Edgar Casey, you know, a lot of people are kind of skeptical about all that, which is, you know, it's only right. But he's found textual evidence in the ancient Egyptian record, and he can read hieroglyphs. So his research is amazing, but the code is pointing to his research, you know? And you'll see this. So let's put this up on here.
The Sphinx has always fascinated me because you could clearly tell that whatever was there before for the head, they chiseled down to what it is now. Like they didn't screw up back then. That
some people thought it was like a dog's. I don't know the name. Is it Anubis, the dog character, or is that the bird?
What Manu has found is that the Sphinx had the origin of the Sphinx was a goddess, a lioness goddess named Mehit. You'd have to read that book and there's articles on the internet by him, and I fully endorse what he's saying now. You know, he was writing this book while we were collaborating on the code, you know, because he's mathematical. He's a PhD, he's a doctor, but I don't know what it is, biophysics or something. But he's been out to Giza many times. He's gone out there more times than I can count, and he's more involved and more informed than a lot of the Egyptologists, you know. And he's breaking new ground. He's a pioneer.
Wow.
And anybody who takes the time to learn Egyptian hieroglyphics and can decipher that, you know, you're committed. That's like a language and then some, because you don't even have a point of reference. It's not like anybody speaks it and can tell you your pronunciation's off, you know?
Yeah,
right.
You have an accent.
Yeah, I mean, he's friends with this German Egyptologist who's kind of like top drawer, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, his work is very important, and the code is pointing to his work. So I think this is all kind of dovetailing towards something in the future. You know?
It's leading to something, right?
Yeah. Sure. Okay, let's. Can you see this?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
You're good.
Okay. Now there's the message, the full message deciphered from the 16 notebook pages of binary code, received on December 26, 1980 by USAF Sergeant Jim Penniston. Staff Sergeant, I should say, during his encounter with an unidentified craft of unknown origin. That's what he's always referred to as. In Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, England, has claimed decipherment of the binary code message by Joe Luciano, 2012, and it was revised by Daniel Davis, and I have to give some credit to him, in 2022, because he realised that the eyes of your eyes wasn't eyes of your eyes, it's eyes of your eye. And he also gave the continuous for planetary advance, fourth coordinate continuous sequence probe. He was able to work that out because there was some kind of like errors in the code, you know, which when Joe Luciano deciphered it, there was some.
It says
kind of
origin year 8100. So this was a message from the future. We take it.
It is, yeah. That's how I see it after having been working on this for 12 years, over 12 years now. So, yeah, with Joe Luciano, he found there were transmission errors, but Daniel Davis was able to correct those. So he was able to get the fourth line, the fourth coordinate continuous sequence probe correct. Yeah. And then you've got the 7 sets of coordinates. And as you can see, that the high Brazil coordinates have come up twice in the code for some reason. Okay. It says origin by Brazil. Origin year 8100. Does that mean that this island, which is submerged now, which is just off the southwest coast of Ireland, resurfaces at some point in the future? Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot in the myth, the Irish mythology about that island, which is still submerged right now. But anyway, you've got all these other sites. Caracol, Belize, which is the Karna Pyramid, Mayan Pyramid, Sedona, Arizona, Giza, Egypt, of course, Nazca Lions in Peru, Taishan, China, Potara, Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece. I don't know whether you've seen that, the Potara of the Temple of Apollo there. It's like a large gateway or window. Yeah. It's just the ruins of what the temple was, but it's left this kind of gateway-looking window structure. Now, let's go on. That's just a sample of the original code that Jim had written down in his notebook. That's the first page of the code. And he wrote.
What are the odds that this would be, if you were just faking that, it would decode as nothing? Like it wouldn't come out as logical sentences or numbers, or it wouldn't make any sense if somebody just scribbled down a bunch of ones and zeros. Doesn't necessarily mean it's binary code with real info in it.
Right. But you see, people have said, how could he do that? You know, but when you think about it, I mean, me being a guitarist, when you play a piece of music, say you learn a solo of a particular song, quite a long solo, it's a pattern.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start playing the first two notes, your fingers just go to the notes automatically. You don't even have to think about it. You just go run through the pattern. But if you was to think about each note you was playing, you'd mess it up.
Yeah.
And I have done that a few times.
Right.
Start thinking about what, and you're interrupting the flow. And it's like walking down a flight of steps. If you just think about each step you took, you probably fall down it. So it's like, it's a pattern that's been put in his head. And he's able to, when he first writes the first two digits, everything just flows from there. He doesn't even have to think about it. It just flows. Well, that's my theory of how he was able to produce these ones and zeros.
And what's impressive about this too, and I'm just going to say this to the younger audience, is back in 1980, if you had a computer in your house, you were rich because nobody had computers back then. And even in our generation, when we started getting computers in the 1990s, they sucked, they weren't fast, they took forever, it was all dial-up. So the fact that he wrote this down in 1980, when computers weren't common, like they would have in military installations, all that, but they were massive things. So this is impressive. The fact that he wrote that's amazing.
And he didn't know about binary code. Didn't know about it then. Yeah, so going on. As I said earlier, I wanted to see how all the coordinates looked on a flat map projection of the Earth. And this was taken from Google Maps. And I just need some water here. I only had over 3 years. I had a 3-year window to get all this done with Google Maps because they changed the format. I mean, I started on this in 2011 and I had a window in time of 3 plus so many years to do this before they altered the format of Google Maps. You can't kind of zoom in on the surface like you used to be able to do, and have this kind of 2D map projection. So anyway, I'm looking at these coordinates, and I remember what Jim said about 23.5, So I thought, I'll do what I usually do. I'll measure the angle between points. And so I started measuring the angles between these coordinates. There's the 23.5, how the Earth is tilted 23.5 away from the ecliptic, in respect to the ecliptic plane, the orbit around the sun. It's 23.43 degrees now, and it's slowly decreasing. But 23.5 is a kind of generic all-round number that you can see in textbooks. So I measured between Nazca and Giza on this flat map projection of the Earth. It wouldn't work on a globe because then you'd be using azimuth angles. It wouldn't be 23.5; it'd be an azimuth angle. But on a flat map projection, this is what these coordinates produced. Right? So then I thought of Jim, and I thought, because there's been this push against the code, Jim hoaxed the whole thing. It was to discredit the witnesses and bring ridicule to them and the whole RFI, And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, he's yanking my chain, isn't he? Because it's my research. It's what I've been finding. And so I carried on with it. I found that Nazca to Caracol, which is where this Mayan pyramid is a 23.5 degrees again. It's on a perpendicular 90-degree angle to that one. So, because you can get 8 kind of expressions of the angle, in a 360-degree circle. So I thought, he's got to be yanking my chain here. 51, and you would recognize that as being the side angle of the Great Pyramid, which is 51.84 degrees. I mean, it's closer to 52 than 51. But this kind of, it amazed me. And I took it all the way to the Greenwich Zero Prime Meridian through High Brazil. See that? And then I found that the angle from Nazca to where the Greenwich Meridian and equator intersect is 11.75 degrees, which is half of 23.5. So, I'm thinking, it's intentional. But did Jim do this? Later, when I got to know Jimmy, you just knew he couldn't have done this because he hasn't got the patience to sit down and do this. And also he had to have knowledge of all the things that I'd researched. He'd have to live and breathe this stuff to be able to, you know, kind of replicate it in any way. So go on further. So yeah, what I did was, I'll go back a bit. That 51 angle, that line, I mirrored it, reflected it on the other side of the Greenwich Meridian, because I was beginning to see that this is an image of the Great Pyramid. And so that's what I did. I mirrored the angle, and you can see in the code that, you know, it's telling you to do these things. You mirror the angle, you reflect it. I realized that the Naxos, Greek island, the Patara temple of Apollo, if you mirror those coordinates, the same coordinates, you just put west instead of east, and you mirror them or reflect them to the west of the Greenwich Meridian, they land right in the Azores. So, you know, there's kind of things that come up that you think, yeah, you know, intuition, and then you realize it's part of the code. So then I mirrored the 11.75 degree angle. Now on that intersect, that's where the Queen's Chamber is in the Great Pyramid. And the King's Chamber is on the 23.5 degree line between Nazca and Giza. And the King's Chamber is offset by 6.5 degrees from the apex to the left or to the west. Yeah. So it's on that line as well. So you've got the two chambers that we know of. And it will become, you know, you'll see it later, it'll become apparent later. Now, what I did was, I thought, all this looks intentional, yeah? Mm-hmm. But if you was to do the same with Africa on the left and the Americas on the right, and you matched up those coordinates, it wouldn't make any sense. There's no pattern there, you see? Yeah. Those are my way of testing it. Now this is the final, because there was like 26 steps that I took to come to this final image, this graphic. And you can see that, I don't know whether you can see my map, that's it, personally. The Azores is part of this fire spiral.
Yeah, Jimmy Blanchette was talking about that, wasn't he, Louis?
Yeah, that's like the golden ratio spiral, he called it, where, you know, hurricanes and galaxies all seem to have similar shape and formation to them.
So the vanishing point is in the Azores. But all this comes together with that geometry, the fire geometry. And the Great Pyramid, you can, well, I mean, in 2D, you know, like triangle. It's an interior, you see the interior, it's the cross-section of the Great Pyramid. It's showing us the two chambers that we know of, but a third chamber higher than the King's Chamber. So you've got the Queen's Chamber, the King's Chamber, you've got this other chamber here. And you see the same pattern in Washington, D.C. map, where the avenues leading off from the White House are all at around 23.5 degrees. So what we're seeing here is that the coordinates, the angles between the coordinates draw up an image, 2D image of the Great Pyramid, cross-section of the Great Pyramid, using just three angles. 23.5, which is the Earth's obliquity angle, 11.75, which is half of 23.5, and 51, which is side angle of the pyramid. Just those three angles. You see, you can see that there, 11.75 there. All these angles, just except one, which is 23.4, but everything else, 23.5, 11.75, 51. Now, is that chance? What's the odds against that? Soft scale. I mean, that was intended. We were intended to find that. I was intended to find that. It was intentional. Do you agree?
Yeah. Do you think that there's energies associated with these places too? Like a lot of the talk of ley lines say that those temples were built on those areas at some point in history because of the energy was different, or it was meant to be a marker for something. So this is just from the Rendlesham Code, but people have theorized that this exists all across the planet. So what do you make of the locations of these things?
Yeah, it's one of the first things that Jim mentioned to me in an email where he said, I think that they're window areas or dimension doorways, or, you know, where the Earth's positive and negative lines cross and they kind of cancel out and neutralize at these points. I said, yeah, I'm into that kind of stuff. Anyway, I've been researching that because of the Kundalini experience, because of the chakras. It's like there's chakras on the Earth, you know. Mm-hmm. It's like
certain locations.
So it all kind of, it's all kind of connected, and it could be that as well. But what I was able to find was this geometry and mathematical part of this, which draws up. It's like another level, you know. There's levels to the code. It's multi-leveled. This is just one of them. So this was the initial information that I'd found in the first 6 months of working on it. Okay, I've come to the point now where I'm no longer amazed by it because I've lived with it too long. You know, I mean, this was back in 2011. I knew all this then.
It's like old news, right? Yeah,
old news. Yeah, it would amaze other people, and they really have to work on it themselves and go step by step, follow the procedure that I did, and then they'll find how it all comes together, and that would prove it to them. So now this is the code. Manu sent me this because he's been working on the digits. It's something like 2,213 bits there. And now just ignore the yellow and the red and that, because it's something that he's been working on, and we're both working on now, actually. It's just a new approach to the code. But to think that those digits there, those ones and zeros, has produced all that information. The information I just showed you, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But all this information has been encapsulated in this string of binary code. Jim could not have done it, you know. There's no way. He's a no-nonsense guy. He just doesn't read. He doesn't really read anything, okay? He hasn't got the aptitude for it. So there's no way he hoaxed it, or, you know. There's no way anyone on this planet could have done it in our timeline, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, there's Giza. There's an aerial satellite image of Giza. The 3 large pyramids. You have these kind of satellite pyramids here, subsidiary pyramids, 3 and 3. Now, Robert Bauval says that these are kind of reflecting the Orion belt stars. And these are as well.
The pattern of 3 seems to, in this the study of ufology, but it's always three entities, 3 sides, like a triangle. It always comes in pairs of 3, so there's a repetitive number there. Yeah,
well, Scott Crichton, his theory was that these 3 pyramids are the same. They represent the 3 belt stars, but in the way they rise on the southeastern horizon, they rise vertically, and then they will set horizontally, like these 3 down here, on the southwestern horizon. Yeah, but at 2 different periods in history. Now, I won't go into that because it's going to confuse people, but that's one of the theories that Scott Crichton came up with, and that's the reason why our book, The Giza Prophecy, was written. Anyway, there's the 3 pyramids. These are, I won't call them Khufu, Khafre, or Menkaure, because I don't associate them with the pharaohs. You know, we haven't got no real proof of that, even though the Egyptologists will, you know.
Yeah, because there's never been a pharaoh found in one of these.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we could go into all that as well. I mean, I've gone through everything with that, and it's just what we indoctrinated with, and I don't agree with that. So it's kind of, I made it impersonal there, you know, by just, and they are referred to as G1, G2, G3, and these, you know, accordingly. So, and there's the Sphinx. So that's what you see in the aerial view of Giza. Now, Manu, Saves the Day, had worked out the ground level center coordinates for the Great Pyramid in 2018. And it was a good thing he did this because, as I say, that there are changes to the landmass, because the landmass is moving, you know, tectonic plate moving. Yep. And you have to take that into consideration when you're looking at the coordinates of certain landmarks or key points on the Giza Plateau, especially. And Giza is situated on the African plate. And so he worked out these coordinates for 2018, which is when we met, and he sent this drawing to me. So it's an aerial view of the Great Pyramid. It's truncated, as you can see there. And I put a red box around this because these are the coordinates he gave me, okay, for 2018. And it was spot on, working with the Glenn Dash Foundation survey maps of Giza. So I was able to take those coordinates, and it was needed for me to be able to decipher the next part of the code, which I'm going to show you. And as I said, 2018. All this information just became available in 2018. So then I realized that I have to consider the African plate moving. Its velocity is, the velocity rate is around 2.15 centimeters a year, okay? Which is not a lot, it's just like, you know, at the azimuth heading of 51.46 degrees, right? And if you go on Wikipedia and you look at African plate, it will tell you that it's been consistent in that movement over the last 100 million years. Now, of course, there's a lot of variables, you know, like the speed might change a little bit, you know, at certain times. But this calculator, which is one of the most accurate plate motion calculators, as I said, I've got the name of it. You know, people who are watching this can pause the video and they can read it. That gave me that data. And so I was able to use another calculator, which is the distance calculator between two sets of coordinates. Gives you the map length distance. And it's so accurate. It's accurate to within like half a millimeter, right?
Wow.
And so I was able to use that as well. But that only became available, I think, in 2014. So I was able to project those coordinates that Manu gave me back 38 years to 1980, so that I knew what the center coordinates of the Great Pyramid was at ground level in 1980. I was able to do it with these calculators. And that was crucial to what the code is telling us.
You are a patient man, Gary.
I've been working on this 12 years, Jason.
It would be incredible patience.
And you have to be this diligent,
yeah.
because you know people are going to throw stones. They're going to try to tear up your math. You have to have all your angles covered to factor all that stuff.
Got to cover all your bases.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I in fact, I do go on skeptic sites and I do kind of argue and debate with them, you know.
Yep. Which is
kind
good.
of rattle their cages because I want to see what they're made of in trying to tear something apart.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, you know the merit of your material when people can't rip it apart. They try, and if it's solid, it's gonna withstand that barrage. So that's not a bad idea.
Right. So looking at this is from GeoHack, all right, which is where Wikipedia get their coordinates from for the Great Pyramid, and you can see they're 29.979175. Okay, is the latitude. This is what is crucial to all this, is the latitude. And that was back when they first started using the GPS. Was it what they used when they first started looking into, was it the 84, WSG 84 system, which takes into the curvature of the Earth, and it's an oblate sphere, so it takes that into consideration as well. But that only became available in 1984. So they must have worked out that the Great Pyramid center coordinates was that latitude. But it's been approximated. What I mean is that it's an all-round figure. Because I found that when I worked back to 1980, it was 2997917544, just 1.7 inches over that latitude. All right. So now we come to this, and it looks complex, but this is the phi ratio. It's how the pyramids have been positioned and constructed to the phi ratio. between the center of G1 in the north. See that? That's those coordinates there. That,
No, they were once facing true north, right? The
well,
pyramids?
yeah, I mean, they are. They are. Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
they're saying like, was it 0.3 arc seconds out? You know.
I'm just
so-
amazed that a structure that big could be that accurate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Based on the age too, right?
oh, insane.
But we could go deeply into that. It's a deep rabbit hole.
That's a whole other episode on the complexity.
Here's another
of Giza.
episode. Yeah. I hope you asked me back when we could talk about that.
Absolutely.
So anyway, this is a major discovery. You know how it is today. Major discoveries are like 2 a penny, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because they're still seen as kind of on the fringe or pseudoscience or whatever. But this is all mathematically worked out using the calculators, the precise and really accurate calculators I've been using. Now, from the centre of the Great Pyramid at latitude to the latitude passing through G3 in the south is 13.72 royal cubits, okay? And then you can divide it with this golden cut. I call it a golden cut because it divides the distance into the phi ratio of 1 and 0.618. So the phi ratio is 1.618, and that divides it into the proportions of 1 and 0.618. Now, if you take 87372, this distance here, and you divide by 540, you get 1.618 exactly. So that's a phi ratio. And that is a major discovery in itself. And that was as a result of the information that came out of the code. So that in itself is a major discovery, and people should be in awe of that because you can see clearly that the pyramids were positioned to the phi ratio. Right, so...
Well, I'll just ask a dumb question because I'm sure somebody out there will have it, but how do you know specifically that information is applicable to Giza, not maybe some other place in the world or some other formation? What was it about it that was specifically, no, this is trying to explain Giza through mathematics?
There's so much mathematical information encoded at Giza. This could be encoded, the same sort of information could be encoded elsewhere. You know, in South America, the pyramids there, China. But I've just concentrated on Giza because of what was coming out of the code.
Right.
Whoever carries on this work after me, because I'm sure this is an ongoing thing, we'll have to look at the other locations, which I haven't looked at properly.
Right.
I've just concentrated mostly on Giza. But yeah, there's this template, there's this phi ratio template there that the 3 pyramids are positioned to. I mean, you've got the south, the original south edge, casing edge of G2, which even though the golden cut doesn't pass through the center of G2, it's passing through the south base. So that is all part of this, design.
Yeah.
And you can see it's been intentional. So going on, what I've done here, I've looked at this other golden cut. Do you see? You see what I mean? You go the other way. You measure down from the latitude passing through the Great Pyramid at 540 royal cubits, and you've got this other golden cut latitude. You see? Now that's important. And the code is pointing to this golden cut latitude, this line. And it does so in 4 different ways. 3 are indirect and 1 is direct. And you find that High Brazil is pointing to that latitude. High Brazil, Naxos is pointing to it. Nazca is pointing to it in an indirect way. And the Giza coordinates from the code are pointing to it. Now, I'm not going to show you all that because it's just so much to take in. Yeah, the step-by-step process of how I found it is going to confuse anyone. I'm trying to get to the meat of this.
Yeah.
So there's this golden cut latitude here. So you've got 2 golden cut latitudes. You can measure down from the Great Pyramid. You can measure up from G3, and you find the same ratio. Okay. Even though it looks like there's nothing significant there because it's passing with G2. It seems to be in, nondescript, part of G2, where this is on the south base. But what you see is from Nazca to this point on the Great Pyramid is exactly 7687 miles. And 7687 is a number that's already in the public domain. So whoever devised the code knew that that number would be found, and it would kind of back up what's being shown here. And all this phi ratio, like the phi, the golden spiral, 2 golden spirals, it all matches up from this point on the Great Pyramid, the western face. You see, and 540 royal cubits down from this latitude gives us the golden cut latitude, and it intersects this Giza diagonal line, which is what the 3 pyramids are kind of aligned to. You find that this is actually a timeline. It's a processional timeline, but I can't get into that. You see what it is with this code. You focus on one thing, and it kind of points to all these other things as well. You look at one thing, and it's confirming something, and that in turn is being confirmed by something else. So I'm not going to go into all that because it's just too much at the moment. It could be another chat.
So yeah, Gary. So I have a question because it gets intense with the math, and some people like myself that are listening it's above our pay grade. But when it comes down to math, is this a universal communication technique? Is this something that you think that this is what civilizations out there would have as a common denominator that we can communicate with?
Yeah, because at Giza you'll find that a lot of the distances between key points of the monuments there are measured out in processional numbers, like subdivisions of the processional cycle at 2, 5, 9, 20 years. So you've got 1080, 540, which is 148 for the processional cycle subdivision. And you find that there's all these subdivisions of the processional cycle, all these numbers. And I'm sure you must have known, must have read about that, about the processional cycle.
I'm not. Nope. That's not something I've read about. I'll be honest. Yeah.
The code. It's all around the world. You'll find them in a lot of these ancient sites. You find these temples that are kind of all positioned and measured. The key points from other parts of the temple. They're all in these procession numbers. And and that's to do with the Earth's axis, obliquity tilt, 23.5. It sort of traces this circle in the sky, which takes 25, 9, 20 years to complete, which is why the zodiac is seen to go backwards, precess backwards. You see, it's like the torque, the dynamics of the Earth being tilted carves out this or traces this circle in the sky. 25, 9, 20 years, but the ancients, it's an ancient estimate because the real scientific estimate for that is 25,772 years. But the ancients used 25,920 because it's easier to encode, and all the subdivisions, they all narrowed down, they all can be narrowed down to 9, to the number 9,
That blows my mind. Yeah, you're doing also historical math. You're not just doing math. You have to calculate what it was like before. That's insane. I'm blown away. Yeah, that's nuts.
You're right.
I do have a quick question, Gary. You see the thumbtack on G1 up there is just slightly askew. So again, was that at one point where it did match directly in the center of that pyramid and Earth, tectonic plates or?
When I first looked at this, and I was looking at the distance between Nazca and Giza. And when I found that when you look at anywhere on Giza, it's something like 768, it's almost 7687 miles, exactly. But to narrow it down, you use meters, to get it exact.
Yeah.
And I found that the only monument at Giza which was exactly 7687 miles was that point on the west face of the Great Pyramid. But as you can see, all this phi ratio geometry, kind of manifests from it, you see?
Yeah.
And this 540 raw cubits distance is, as I say, it's 48th subdivision of the precessional cycle. So that's significant. You've got 540 here, from here to there, 540 from there to there. And I'll show you.
Do you know what it looks like? You know what it looks like from above like that, the picture you were just showing us? It looks like mathematical braille. Do you know what I mean? Like it just with the bumps and everything, it looks like that's it's
well, it's a legend. It's clearly a legend. It's some type of a scale or something that they're trying to say. If you use these units, use these angles, use these measurements, you can decode a lot of things on your planet. This is sort of the global legend for understanding that cosmic math, I think.
Yeah. Well, what you're seeing here is a major discovery, as I said. And it's all come from the code. And as I say, that 7687 miles already in the public domain. Public domain relating to the fire line theory of Stanley Mailer, right? Which was like 2005, I think that was when he first came up with that. And it's on the internet. So whoever devised the codes used numbers that are already in the public domain, so it backs up what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's go on. So that distance, as I said, 540 royal cubits from this latitude there to the Golden Cut latitude is actually 282.744 meters. And if you take 282.744 meters and you divide by 1 royal cubit, which is 0.5236 meters, you get 540 royal cubits exactly. And those are the latitudes there. That's the that's the Great Pyramid there. That's the, let's use the cursor. That's the Great Pyramid coordinates there, center coordinates. That's the Golden Cut latitude coordinates. And of course, the longitude coordinates are the same because you're measuring down 180 degrees. But it's exactly 540 royal cubits, and this proves it. And this is using the Vincenzi distance calculator, which is really accurate. So I'm just showing you an example of of the precise, meticulous measuring that I've been able to do using these calculators, these really advanced calculators.
That's, again, that's like, to me, nuts. Like we're using these calculators and advanced technology for this math that clearly the Egyptians knew without that. And there's no records of their mathematical prowess in this, on how they built this. So that's the mystery. It's just how the hell is this possible?
Well, I'm getting there. With the research I've been doing, and I'm getting there slowly. But the code is what has helped me. It's as if the code is uncovering the mysteries of what's been encoded at Giza. It's giving up its secrets because of the code, and that is phenomenal in itself. So anyway, let's carry on with this. So from the south base edge, original south base casing edge of G1, Great Pyramid, to the north base edge of G2 is 250 royal cubits, okay? So it's 320 royal cubits to the Golden Cut latitude from the south base of G1. See this? And it's 70 royal cubits from Golden Cut latitude up to the north base of G2. Is that all understandable? Mm-hmm. So you take 320 and you divide by 70 and you get this number, right? And it's like a constant, okay? You could actually divide 32 by 7 and you still get the same number. And this shows up elsewhere on the Giza Plateau, and Manu Safesadeh gave me an example of how that number, 4.571428, repeats, comes up elsewhere on the Giza Plateau, right? So I was meant to do this. I was meant to divide 320 by 70 to get this number. Now, you look at the numbers of the Golden Cut latitude, all right? Let's go on. So 320 divided by 70, you get this number. Now, you take the Golden Cut latitude numbers there, and you times by that number, you get this number. Okay. Does that all make sense?
And that 137 is also referred to as like a fine structure content. Am I correct?
It's the inverse fine structure constant.
Inverse.
This is how this gets really amazing. Okay.
And to our viewers, and I'm not an expert on this either, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fine structure content kind of describes atomic shapes of how, like, how
it's like
things would be put together in the spectrum of atoms and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like the fingerprint or DNA of each kind of wavelength of light. That's how you can see it, but it's also the interactions of elementary particles and photons, and it's the ratio between them and how they interact. And the mathematical formula is that it's the ratio of the square of the charge of an electron divided by Planck's constant and the speed of light. But you don't have to know about fine structure constant. If you was to remove one number from the fine structure constant, everything would collapse. Nothing would exist anymore.
Yeah,
that's how critical this constant is. So anyway, so this is what you get. You get this number, okay? So the code is pointing at this latitude. You take these distances, you divide that number by that number, you get this number, and then you times that number with the numbers on the latitude, golden cut latitude, and you get this number, okay? Simple, yeah?
Yep.
Now, when I looked at the 2014 code data recommended value of the inverse fine structure constant, it's called the inverse, and I'll show you later. It's called the inverse because really the fine structure constant is 1 divided by 137.0359, and that gives you the fine structure constant itself. So it's also called alpha, okay? The Greek letter alpha. But this
that's interesting how they name that alpha being like the beginning, right? The alpha is the top, and that is the most important thing in physics. If, like you said, if one of those tiny integers disappears, the whole nature of reality essentially falls apart, right?
Carl Sagan said, and it's in his book, I'm trying to think of that book, yeah.
Pale Blue Dot?
And I know the page number, 205.
I'm not surprised you know the page number, Gary. You are a math whiz.
Nuts. Crazy. Yeah.
You're kind of good with numbers. We could admit that.
Thank you, guys. But I'm very humble,
We're not worthy. Yeah.
No, I am. I don't ever, what I mean is I'm on the level with people, I'm just not trying to put myself above anyone. I just look at the facts. So anyway, that number there, this is on Wikipedia, and that was on the 20th of May, 2019, okay, at 2:39 in the morning. And that was a number, see these last three numbers here, 139. Okay. When I first discovered this number there by looking at all this by step-by-step process, and I came up with this number, I was only going by the 2014 determination, because every 4 years code data, which deals with all the scientific universal constants, they change every amount of time. They change every 4 years. Yeah. They'll give an updated version of whatever the determination is of each of these constants. And they'll publish it 6 months later. So it's not ever really published on the 4th year. It's published 6 months later after the 4th year. So every 4 years, they will give a new determination. So when I looked at this number, 137.035999084, I was depending on the 2014 determination, which was 137.035999139. The last three digits are different. See, 084. And I thought, that's drat. That's okay. It's given us 6 decimal places anyway. It's accurate to within 6 decimal places, but the last 3 numbers. So, but that's enough to go on. It was anyone would be in awe of that, knowing that when you juggle these numbers here with this golden cut latitude and you come to that number, it's still close.
Gary, you had mentioned that you had received some kind of download or mathematical abilities. Now, clearly showing this is like, holy crap, he's not kidding.
It's a phenomenon in itself. It's a phenomenon in itself.
Well, I'm,
yeah.
Personally, I'm blown away by your mathematical equations, and like you've lost me a long time ago, but holy crap, that's impressive. And this is evidence of what you received. I mean, I'm impressed. This is cool.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, people, they can look at the video, they can pause it, and they can get it, each step of the way. So even if it's gone over their heads at the moment.
Similar to we did with Jimmy Blanchett, if anybody is a mathematician or wants to see the root formula, contact us. We'll get you the base data. It's easier than giving you all the dry calculations to prove Gary used the right constant in the right year to make sense of it. So if anybody does have questions, get in touch with us. We'll give you that minutia, but we'll spare our general audience all the nitty gritty.
Okay. Now, getting back to the crux of what I'm saying here is that this was a number that I came up with, all right? Now, it is the fine structure constant to within 6 decimal places or 9 digits of the 2014 determination, yeah? That's the last 3 digits are just different. The 31 is, it means within the range of probability there, see, of those last 3 numbers. But then, you see, Jim Penniston kept on, getting at me. When's this book going to be finished? This is the Rendlesham Enigma. And he said, you know what? He said, it'd be good to have a last chapter that will be a bridge that leads on to the findings of the code. I said, yeah, let's do that. So I was writing this last chapter. And I thought, you know what? What I just shown you there, that discovery there, I thought that would go in the last chapter. Yeah? So I'm writing that into the last chapter. But as you can see, the last 3 numbers are different to that. 084. That's what the golden cut latitude at Giza generates. It generates this number. And then I thought, while I'm writing this was in 2018 to 2019. In May 2019, I thought, I wonder if they've published a new determination of the fine structure constant yet, the inverse number. And I looked on Wikipedia. You see, I see this 139 on the same day, 20th of May 2019. And I looked at this on May the 28th. So this was just, 8 days
later.
And I looked at the 2018, right, determination, and what is it?
Bang on match.
Bang on match, right?
So it's almost like you were 6 months too early in your discovery of that. They planted it so that your numbers would jive 6 months after this was released in 2018. Like that is very specific.
What's the odds of that?
Yeah, impossible.
So that number there gives us the 2018 determination.
Yeah.
All right. And this was published only 15 hours after the 2014. They've been relying on that since. And
makes me hate math even more. The fact that it changes per day. You know what I mean?
Well, when you're
when it was
factoring
last
things
week, it's not this week. Screw
you're
you,
factoring
math.
things in motion. You need to have a set of numbers, but we know that in 4 years, those numbers are going to change. And may not be that big of a deal if we're at 6 or 7 decimal places. It's still 137 is the base number. But like the calculation for pi, it changes all the time as well. It's never an exact integer. So
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah, these things are needed in the world of math and calculating. It's just part of it.
Have we got enough time? Because I'm just getting to the...
How many slides have you got left? We might have to do
only
a part
a few.
2.
Yeah, I know. We'll have to do a part 2, but there's just a few. Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
let's have it.
The thing about this, the most important thing about this, is whoever devised the code knew when that line, that latitude, which divides the distance between the 2 pyramids into phi ratio 1 and 0.618, they knew with that line, they knew it would reach those numbers, right, the latitude. Because the grid coordinates of the planet remain the same, but the land mass is slowly moving underneath. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So any point that you're looking at, if you're looking at the coordinates of any point, like these key points at Giza, the numbers in the latitude and longitude will change slightly. Yeah. So whoever devised the code knew when that line of latitude, which divides into the phi ratio, the positions of the pyramids, they knew when it would reach those numbers in the latitude, right? And it would only be in 1980, okay? Because as I
they
said,
timed the continental drift at the exact point of the date of when that code was dropped.
Got it. Going back to this picture, see the Giza 1980, these coordinates all relate to 1980. So they knew that this line was slowly drifting north-east, and it would reach this point where it became these numbers in the latitude, which generates the inverse fine structure constant number. They knew when it would, and it was only in 1980 that it would do it, because look, in 1979, if you took the latitude then, the golden cut latitude, it would be in those numbers. And if you apply the same mathematical formula, it would be 0359975, okay? And in 1981, when it's gone past this point in 1980, it'd be 137036. 1980 was the only year that produced the whole 12-digit number that would come up in 2018. So it's in the whole timeline of history, 1980 was the only year that they could implement this demonstration of retrocausality, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that the incident, the Rendlesham incident, it gives us the answer as to why the Rendlesham incident happened in 1980, to produce this code, which proves, it not only authenticates itself mathematically in this way, but it also shows that retrocausality is a reality, that it shows a demonstration of retrocausality, that time, that in the future, information has been sent back to the past that has an effect on the present, which was 2018 when all this came up, and possibly into the future. So I'm not saying
who knows?
It could
Maybe
be,
in a few decades, this code will have all kinds of new significances that we don't even know of right now, because it's already proven that it can be a message of what's waiting for you in the future, right? 1980 had to be the day to get everything to match up.
So this intelligence, it's either from the future or it's in a domain which is outside our timeline, which has a bird's eye view of the past and the future. So it could either be any of those two, but whatever it is, this intelligence, this advanced intelligence that's devised the code, it could only be an intelligence that's not confined or restricted to the laws of our temporal spatial reality. That's all I can say. I can't say it's extraterrestrial because we don't know. We've got no proof of that, but we have proof of this temporal anomaly, this demonstration of retrocausality.
Well, if they live outside of time, because time is a dimension, it's linear, but if they live outside of that, the rules are, there's no rules. Like, you could do whatever you want. And I almost wonder if the laws of math apply to when you're out of linear time. Does this only apply to us now in our dimension, or would it apply to them in their dimension as well? I'm curious to know.
Yeah. Well, that's my conclusion. I can't say it's extraterrestrial or whatever. It's just this code, it's proven itself, it's authenticated itself, but in a way that, there's no doubt that there's some kind of time manipulation here going on. Here's another thing. There's the movie named titled UFO with Gillian Anderson and David Raffan. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I've seen it on TV, but I haven't actually watched it yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is crucial as well. That movie came out in 2018, but the plot is that there was this binary code sent from this intelligence, and it contained the fine structure constant. And this was in 2018, which coincided with this information about the code coming out. How it authenticates itself. And you see there here, during an interview in August 2018 by interviewer Robbie Graham, the director of the movie UFO, Ryan Eslinger was asked, what kind of research did you do for the movie? And he said, NARCAT publishes technical reports on UFO sightings, including the O'Hare Airport sighting, And I also came across declassified documents that the NSA published online concerning potential methods of communication with other life forms. One document in particular talks about using things like the fine structure constant in our communications, which informed the decoding of the signal. I also consulted with an astrophysicist at Ohio State University, Paul Sutter, who fact-checked the script as much as you can fact-check a movie called UFO. During our discussions, the idea of using binary as a method of communication came up. Among these declassified NSA documents, which Ryan Eslinger mentioned, was surely the one written by Lambros de Kalimahos. I don't know how you pronounce it. You probably pronounce that better than I would. The relevant quote from it given above. Okay, and this is, it will not be difficult for them, intelligence, to demonstrate their intellectual and technological superiority, if they but know the seventh digit of the fine structure constant. They are ages ahead of us. We know only the first 5 for sure. Suspect the sixth. This number, 137039, is the ratio, among others, of the speed of light to the speed of the hydrogen electron. It may take a century to calculate this constant to 9 digits. Now, that was in 1974, so they only knew the inverse fine structure constant. So that...
Up to 3 decimal places.
3 decimal places, yeah. But this was in 1974, which was 6 years before the Rendlesham incident, which points to a latitude passing through Giza, which generates the inverse fine structure constant of the full 12 digits.
That's crazy.
And yeah, I'll leave that up on there. The fine structure constant plays an important role throughout the film. You know, it suggested that the constant may in fact be the same throughout space, but not time. That the constant might be variable proves important to possibly solving the much more complex communications received from the aliens, which in turn suggests, though this is never spoken by any character, that the aliens are not from a distant point in space, but in time, namely our own future. Okay,
this was the company that guy works for, Skunk Works, which is, you know, as we know, black budget, Lockheed Martin. They're looking at all kinds of crazy stuff. And at the date of this, they were even saying that there's something definitely there, that this is like that extra tempestrial theory, like Michael Paul Masters, where it's just us in the future coming back. It's lending credence to that.
So I was meant to read that because it's kind of whoever devised the code, it's like I pick up on these things and it's like I'm being led to them. Yeah. And it's like saying, oh, well, yeah, that's what it is. It's, you know, about time. So
I'm simply blown away, Gary. I'm seriously.
I think we leave it there, you know, because I've got loads of other slides here which I can use maybe in another.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2.
Yeah,
we'll end the screen share on this for now, just so we can get our beautiful smiling faces up again. I think you got to do it on your end there. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's a lot to take in. I know some of our viewers might think, you know, when I first watched Jimmy Blanchett presenting some of his ideas, I had to rewind it several times. Listen to it and try to make sense of it. Eventually it clicks. You don't have to be a mathematician.
Yeah.
It's like it primes your brain the first time you hear it. Your brain just says, you know what, let's make sense of something else and forget it. You listen to it again, it kind of resonates, but doesn't make sense. And then you get that clarity after. So this is part of us raising our own consciousness and our own mind. You know, we know that if these beings are out there, they're at a far advanced level. Well, you think our math is complicated. Imagine what they understand. And we're literally trying to nibble at the heels of a giant by even doing this. And it's mankind's best attempt to get close. And you did a great job, Gary. I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased it went well, because this is a very difficult, it's very difficult to, you know, kind of articulate the findings, you know, describe them, explain what's going on.
And there's so much too, right, Gary? I mean,
there's so much.
There's just so much. You can't blurt it out all at once for it to make sense, right? It's
well, look at his book, 700 pages. You're not reading that in an hour.
That's just volume 1. That's just volume 1.
Yeah.
What I showed you, what I showed you there is in the last chapter of this book anyway. You know, but and also what I showed you earlier on is the initial information that came out of the code, which I found in 2011. But you know what? There's so much more. I mean, it's pointing to the Sphinx, it's pointing to the Azores. It's giving us the answers to mysteries that we've been asking ourselves for centuries. You know?
Right.
So this is the implications of all this is just off the scale.
So basically, it's put there a while back, but as we're progressing as a species, get more intelligence, we're realizing it's more like intentionally put there for a reason, right? As we discover, it's going to serve a purpose to us in the long run. Just trying to figure out what it is right now, right?
Yeah, the takeaway from all this, though, is that if you're looking for proof of contact, then my view, the code has it. I mean, it's given us a demonstration of edge causality. No one could have known or predicted that 12-digit number. Even when Jim Pennison came forward with the existence of the code in 2010, I mean, it had to take till 2018 that when it was finally deciphered and that came up. So the way it authenticates itself with a demonstration of retrocausality is proof to me. It's mathematical proof.
Yeah, the greatest minds in science couldn't figure out all 12 digits at that point in time. How does some military guy who's not a scientist just do the world's greatest mathematical equation and nail it with it doesn't make sense. Yeah, you could go there. Sure, maybe it's 1 in a bazillion, who knows, whatever the percentage. It's very highly unlikely. In a court of law, it wouldn't even be admissible because it would be so ridiculously small a fraction that it wouldn't even be worth discussing. So before we let you go today, though, Gary, where can people follow you if they want to find out more?
Well, I did have a website, but I'm now redoing it because, the Flash, Adobe Flash visuals, they kind of went out, of existence.
Yeah.
And it messed up the website that I had because that's what it was predicated on. So I'm working on a new website at the moment. So I haven't got a website to give you. I mean, you can find the old website if you look through the old pages. I mean, that's still on kind of, what do they call it? The website that gives you all the old pages, the info.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
You can still find it, but and there's a lot of articles on there. But I'm working on a new one. All I can say really is I've got 4 books out at the moment. The one called the Serpent Growl, The Shining Ones, the Giza Prophecy, and the Rendlesham Enigma. The Rendlesham Enigma is important right now. And I'm sure that when I get the other books out, the follow-up books, it's going to change. It's going to make a big change.
Well, I think it's interesting that in 1993, you were given a gift and be able to do math to basically help this investigation forward and decipher something that somebody else that witnessed something in close proximity needs help with. So it's funny, you guys are tied somehow. I mean, the events are a few years apart, but there's a reason why it happened, right? So,
but it isn't about me, with all humility. I just want to share the information. It needs to be shared. I feel a duty to do that, for working on the code, which Jim asked me to do. So that's what I'm doing. It's not about me. I don't really promote myself, which is why this show here, I was kind of surprised that you asked me on, because I've kind of been hiding in the shadows a bit. But this is explosive information.
It's important, and that's what we cover. Louis and I cover all aspects, and math is going to come into it, philosophy comes into it, other sciences. There's so many disciplines are involved in this phenomenon, and yours is equally as important as anybody else. And as you uncover stuff, that's more evidence to add to what maybe has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. We're just now paying attention to it, right?
Yeah.
So, Gary, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Louis and I are really appreciative of your time. Let's do a part 2 for sure. And let's turn back to the audience, of course, Louis, right? To subscribe and like and give us a comment.
Let us know what you think. Drop us some comments. We love feedback. Again, we're doing this for the viewer. Give you as much stuff that we can validate as being legit, not totally nuts. You do with it what you please. But you can't say that you're growing a healthy appreciation of the phenomena unless you look at everything. And we could spend a lifetime doing this show and still never look at everything. So
looks that way. Yeah.
We try to make it a small junket, give you another installation, give you something else to consider, because you can't just talk about 75-year-old UFO crash stories, right? Like, let's talk about cutting edge. Let's keep it fresh. Let's keep it different. That's why our show is different from a lot of others. But do let us know. We do appreciate the feedback. And with that, Mr. Gary Osborn, thank you so much for your time, sir. Love chatting with you, and we'll have you back on again soon.
Fantastic. It was great talking to you guys. Thank you very much.
Are you paying attention?